Today I would like to address some of the common frustrations survivors will experience when they are on their journey to heal from narcissistic abuse. Many survivors will say that healing or facing the aftermath of narcissistic abuse is way harder than remaining in the toxic dynamic they found themselves in, which is why it may take up to 7 attempts at average to finally leave an abusive relationship for good. This can happen for a number of reasons. First of all, narcissists have a tendency to manipulate their victims back into that dynamic. Some have been living a life in total isolation and are lacking a support system that will help them to stay away and remain no contact. Others got so used to simply dissociate and go numb to endure the pain which made staying easier, or they are afraid to face their own shadows and reopen wounds that may just be too painful to look at. And lastly, trauma bonding is most definitely always at play, which is very difficult to break for many. Quite obviously, breaking up with a narcissist is not a normal breakup. You can't just get over it and move on, and that's why it's so crucial to first understand that healing is a marathon and not a sprint. To give you a number, it took me 2 years to fully heal from my relationship with a malignant narcissist that was merely 5.5 months long. That's how earth-shattering and exhausting it was. I was committed to counseling once a week and did a lot of journaling until I had nothing left to talk about and felt whole again. You will certainly feel a lack of motivation. It takes a lot of time and energy to sit through this phase, and let's not forget courage. The 3 keys to healing are consistency, patience, and self-forgiveness to navigate the highs and lows you will encounter, or even the urge to return to unhealthy dynamics. Healing is not a linear process, as many might think. Secondly, healing will send you through the 5 stages of grief that consists of denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and ultimately, the acceptance of what happened. It's not uncommon to be accompanied by an intense feeling of shame and guilt, while deep down knowing full well that you were the victim in the story. And that, unfortunately, may create a lot of confusion and the risk of returning to a former abuser. Point number 3 of frustrations is trying to figure out who you are and who you were before you met the narcissist. One of the outcomes of severe narcissistic abuse is the erosion of one's identity, as narcissists tend to condition and reshape their victims to their likings and constantly shift the goalpost where nothing you do or are is ever good enough, forcing you to constantly adjust or change yourself or your behavior to please an individual who can never be satisfied. Next, one of the most common frustrations you will definitely encounter is feeling misunderstood by friends, family members, coworkers, or even therapists. Narcissistic abuse, especially the covert type, is a type of abuse one must have experienced in order to truly be able to know what it feels like and how to identify it. Asking a survivor, "Why didn't you just leave?" may seem like a reasonable question to ask, but it's certainly not easy to answer. Many survivors even feel invalidated or attacked by that question, putting the blame for their own misery on them, rather than their manipulative perpetrator. However, I think it's a very important question to ask to ignite the healing journey, because there was a reason as to why we stayed, even while we knew that it was hurting us. And if you're working with a therapist or a counselor who isn't familiar with the insidious type of abuse, it can even feel very frustrating as well. That being said, just because a therapist or a counselor isn't familiar with narcissistic abuse per se, it doesn't mean they are bad at their profession. My counselor, for instance, wasn't familiar with it, but she knew about domestic violence and abusive behavior, which already covered a lot of the bases. Luckily, I was knowledgeable enough at the time to integrate what I knew, and my counselor was willing to learn about narcissistic abuse to broaden her own experience. So don't forget to perform your own research once you know what you're dealing with, and find people or a support group who can relate. There are plenty of online communities of survivors out there, such as this one, that can help you. Next point of frustrations is difficulties to maintain boundaries or no contact with the narcissistic ex and others who interfere with your healing. I often say that going no contact feels like going cold turkey on a drug, but you have to remember that you cannot heal in the same environment that made you feel sick in the first place. Most of us never truly knew what it meant to have boundaries at all, because we lived our lives pleasing and showing up for other people and take care of their needs before our own all the time. Point number 6 of frustrations you will face is thinking that you won't get triggered anymore. And I'm sorry to say this, but you certainly will. A huge part of healing is simply learning better coping strategies in life and learning how we respond to certain triggers or situations rather than letting ourselves react to a moment we may later regret. Complex post-traumatic stress is often not 100% curable, but the symptoms can be managed, especially when this has been something you've already been struggling with since your childhood. In this case, old patterns and conditioning may be very hard to break. However, we can learn the tools and techniques and change our belief system to a certain extent to not have these triggers or conditions control our lives indefinitely, as they used to in the past. Keep in mind that we also walk through life being exposed to new traumatic experiences over and over again that can affect us in a variety of ways. Frustration number 7 is realizing you may fall for another toxic person again. It's not uncommon for survivors of narcissistic abuse to fall for another covert narcissist or a person with a dismissive, avoidant attachment style. Both play out very similarly. However, those with an avoidant attachment are not intentionally hurting you in most cases. But why do survivors fall into the same old trap? One of the reasons may be that you start putting yourself out there too early just to avoid feeling lonely, because the healing journey can certainly evoke a strong feeling of loneliness. Or there might be still a few parts you haven't healed from yet, lessons to learn, or the new person may be more covert or show some behavior that is actually healthy until patterns emerge. However, every new or similar experience may sharpen your instincts to eventually end up with the right person. Number 8. Let's face it, many of us met the narcissist at their lowest, dishing us a sob story of their lives, and us natural empaths felt a need to rescue or even fix the other person. It's therefore not uncommon that, once we're on a good path on our healing journey, that we think we can help another survivor in a similar predicament. Sometimes it works, but not always. Everybody's journey is unique. You can be a support, but not save the other person, for everybody has to do the work on themselves. It can be frustrating if you believe there's a one-size-fits-all approach to healing, and just because something worked for you, it may not apply to the other person. Next point on my list is that you will be able to see through people much easier and faster than others will. You will usually notice this frustration coming up at social gatherings or at your workplace. You spot the covert manipulation tactics in this new, charming and charismatic coworker who quickly pulls everybody on their side just to get promoted or take charge in the office, while you've worked really hard to get to where you are today. But they cannot fool you. In worst case scenario, they are likely to antagonize you due to your indifference toward them. And my last point, one that is not only frustrating, but that can also be dangerous. Other people will side with your abusive ex or remain neutral in this situation. Unfortunately, in this case, survivors often have to cut their losses and get rid of these potential flying monkeys to avoid triangulation and other mind games, or your narcissistic ex receiving information about you that could eventually harm or make you break no contact. It's understandable that some people want to avoid drama and remain neutral, but if they are truly aware what truly happened between the two of you, then remaining neutral is actually just saying, I don't care what happened to you, and they are still choosing the abuser over you. So yeah. These were 10 very common frustrations survivors will encounter on their healing journey. If you experience more than that, please write it in the comments section for other survivors to find. And if you would like to learn more about narcissistic abuse or my personal story, please check out the other podcasts on my YouTube channel and my book, Narcotic Love, which you can find on Amazon in both English and German. Thank you very much for listening, stay safe, and have a great day.